emodels.co.uk. Make something awesome.
Hi everyone, this is Ant and welcome to part 2 of my build of the Dragon Models 1144 Orbiter from the Space Shuttle, which I'm making for emodels.co.uk of course. So yes, as you can see, things have moved on a little to the point where I've actually glued the front section on, and I've been working on getting that seam to go away, which this is only the first pass of primer. But as you see, it does look pretty good. Done quite a good job there, if I do say so myself. And actually that continues round to, you've got 3 sections meeting. You've got the top half of the wing, you've got the lower part of the wing, this wall section, and of course the front of the nose section. And given that it's just a first pass and I was dealing with clear plastic for the top part of the wing, it's actually pretty good. The bit that goes, I'll get to that, don't worry. So looking along the wing, we can see there is a little bit of a seam that I'm going to need to clean up. But not a bad beginning. Let me just zoom out because I think I'm too far in. So there we go, hopefully you can see that. The other side's not quite as good. There's a little bit of work that still needs to be done in and around here. It's not quite as smooth as I'd like it. But the main part, where it all fits together, I've got a really nice shape. And yeah, like I say, you can see the line across there, but once it's got another coat of primer and paint and whatnot on it, you won't see that. The other thing what I wanted to do was get the first bit of primer in the gear wells. I wanted to check the damage over here where the broken wing tab was. And also I did quite a bit of work around where these 2 halves of this plate meet. I was trying to get rid of the seam line, and it's mostly gone. There's a little bit here still. And of course, in reality, this is a movable flap, but I've got no detail of that to work with, and of course, it's not a separate piece for that purpose. So yeah, more filling. There was 2 little gaps down in here between where these 2 panels meet. So I used more of the Vallejo putty. And a little bit around this bottom edge as well. I'm not sure how, you can obviously still see the line going down, and I wasn't sure if that was supposed to be there or not, so I didn't want to take too much away. Plus, getting any kind of sanding implements in there is really difficult because you've not got much space to work with. But I've sorted out this across the top here, so that's all quite nice and smooth. Excuse that. And yes, and obviously you can see the cargo bay doors are on, but honestly these things are an absolute nightmare. If you are going to try and get them to work, you need to put them on before you put the front panel on at the end here, and maybe the rear as well, because there's a lip that you've got to try and get on from the inside, where you've got to get it over the hooks. Remember the 4 hooks running down the inside of the wing? So you've got to get that on whilst at the same time kind of bending it so it'll go over the lip on its way out, and the same at the front. So even given that they're on, they're still kind of hopeless. The hooks are under a lot of stress. You've got to kind of slide them to the end of that hook shape in order to get them to kind of bend down at all. But in that process of bending them down, one of them has already snapped down here. And to be honest, it doesn't look great when it's open either, because it looks like it's barely hanging on. It looks like if you put too much pressure on it, it's going to snap something. So I'm thinking of a plan B. what I'm probably going to end up doing is cutting all this raised stuff off and sanding it all down, making it all nice and smooth, and then painting on the black details, which I'll probably just paint the whole thing with black primer and then put some little squares of masking tape on where they are on the actual shuttle. But for example, these things down here, so you can see they're not big fat things sticking out. Obviously it's a kind of a double jointed mechanism there that allows them to close up nice and smooth. So I'm going to replicate that. So they won't be able to open and close, but my idea is to leave them so you can lift them off and at least then see the interior detail in there. Well, speaking of which of interior detail, obviously I've done the nose section. Now this is kind of like the lower part of the cockpit, the lower level. So I put it all together and sprayed it because I was a bit frustrated, because once the upper kind of part of the cockpit is on, you're not really going to see any of it anyway. But then with the upper cockpit, obviously you've got no pilot figures. The control sticks, the joysticks, they both snapped on me as soon as I tried to take the flash off. So really delicate, and ultimately I'm not going to be able to use them. So once you've got the cockpit with its 4 empty chairs in it in position, I can just push fitting it in for now. You don't see a great deal of the area below. So I'll probably just paint it all a light colour, so what you can see is at least visible. Maybe if I do a little bit of detail work in there, maybe the areas you can see. But yeah, 4 empty seats isn't thrilling, which brings me to the next kind of conundrum. Here is the cockpit part, which I've glued the nose cone on, and I put liquid mask in the cockpit windows. Now for this I used this one, the Abteilung 502 liquid mask. Reason being, it's a lot more fluid, so you can kind of, well, what I did was use a brush and then kind of overload it and move it around till it meets all the edges and kind of just fills the areas quite nicely, actually. Now this has had a couple of days to dry, so it's gone pretty transparent, which makes you think, oh, do I need to do it again? You don't. It's just really thin, and also with 3 or whatever how many days it's been since I did it, it's dried to the point where it's quite the opposite of opaque. What's that? Transparent. There we go. So that's good stuff, but again, you wouldn't want to use this for chipping or something, because like I say, it's quite viscous, or the opposite of viscous probably. Anyway, so this fits onto here, so it would be possible to kind of have it removable, but I've got a problem. I've got a big fit problem. There's a chunk missing out of it down here. Now that wasn't me. On this side it fits okay, as long as I've got some pressure on it. So with glue it'd be okay, but from the rear there is a lip where it sticks out. I'm not sure if that's supposed to stick out or not, but it does, so perhaps it's intentional. So I'm not sure. I was torn the idea of trying to get some plastic card and cutting a tiny slither, trying to glue it on there to fill that gap. That might be possible, but to be honest, with the way that it sits there, I think it will spoil the overall model if it's not glued on. otherwise big unsightly gaps. And of course I've got to make the decision soon, because in order to move on I've got to glue and fill and sand. So yeah, that's probably what I'm going to have to fill that gap either way, but it'll be easier to fill if it's glued in place rather than trying to fill on, in something that's removable, hence the plastic card. I don't know. But on a positive note, like I say, from the bottom, it's all working quite nicely. Now the flaps, I was going on about having the flaps down and stuff when it's coming into land, but of course the whole reason the nose goes up when it's landing is because the flaps come up, not down. It shows on the box that the flaps do work moving upwards. For the life of me though, can't figure out how that's supposed to happen, because this top trailing edge stops them from going up. We try bending them up and they just pop out. Now of course, because of Mr. Stupid cutting off that tab, that's not something I want to happen, because then getting them back on, I'll probably just snap it back off again. So it looks like the wings are going to be kind of more or less fixed in their normal positions. Same way on the tail fin. That is supposed to be able to move from left to right according to the box, but it doesn't. You try moving it left or right and it just pops out. So maybe it was their intention, but it's certainly not a practical. You could move it and glue it there, I guess, if you wanted a fixed, offset position. But aside from that, I mean, it does look good. It does look a lovely shape. It reminds me of the Thunderbird 1 shape from Thunderbirds 2086. There's an obscure reference for you. You've never seen that. So yeah, I need to cut these off probably, clean up all this, maybe even glue the doors together so it just comes off as one piece, and then you can see the gubbins underneath, because as soon as I cut all these off, you're not going to be able to have them open by themselves. So I might just glue them together so it sits nicer, there's no gap, and hopefully it'll just work going on and off like that. So it's kind of back to the drawing board, which is a shame, because I suppose it could have been, if you can do it on a Gundam or a Bandai kit, I'm sure they would have come up with a clever mechanism to allow you to open and close those doors nicely. It's, especially being a painted model. But yeah, I want to do it all buttoned up with the landing gear down coming in. So having the option then to remove that to see what's inside might be just a nice bonus. And with the cockpit, you'll just see what you can see through the windows. As if it was an amazing cockpit full of great detail and tiny little, bits and pieces, fine, maybe work on the whole transparent cockpit thing. The only other thing to worry about as well, though, is you've got the front RCS assembly, which is this one here. But you've got to glue those two sets in individually. So what you need to do is kind of put this in position as well as you can. Put the first one on, glue it, and you'll find that it'll wobble around. So it gives you time to get this into position, get the cockpit cover on. And then I used a cocktail stick just to, from outside, just go into the holes and just line up the kind of the trumpet part of the RCS thrusters, just the top two actually. So yeah, it's not that good a fit that it just goes in the right position you need. You need to kind of put it in with some, I use Tamiya Extra Thin, one at a time, and then get it in position and adjust accordingly until they've all lined up nicely. Because if I do glue this on, obviously I'm not going to see anything apart from how well those holes line up with the cockpit holes. So yes, so get this primed. Maybe going to glue on. Yeah, I'll prime this, and I'll show you some other stuff. The other stuff just being everything else that's been primed in a first coat of black primer, essentially. So you've got the sections for inside the cargo bay. So this is like a space lab or something. So you've got like a corridor tube that comes from the back of the cockpit, and obviously there's a EVA door maybe on the top, and then into what's like a space lab. And then at the back here, this is all scientific equipment apparently, which just sits at the end of the cargo bay. I've got the landing gear assemblies all together and primed. Same with the telescopic arm. Which sits along the cargo bay door. As you've seen before, you've got the thrusters, and then there's more just bits and bobs. Oh, and those are the wheels, which I've only done one side of so far. Got the other side not painted. Okay, so as you can see, things have progressed slightly. I've fitted the tail fin and the landing gear legs just so I've got some way of holding it and putting it down when I was priming the bottom. Okay, so first thing is I've glued these flaps because yeah, they just weren't working for me. One was sagging lower than the other one, and they didn't really add much, to be honest with you. So I've just glued them level by just running some Tamiya extra thin through these gaps in the panels, and that's seeped its way in. That's probably not the strongest bond because there's not an awful lot of glue in there, but in theory it should be fine as long as I don't knock them or anything too hard. So yeah, all the interior is painted in the black primer. I've also cleaned up all these edges, and those hooks have gone. So what I'm left with on, say if I take this piece as well, one of the doors, that will just kind of go the way around. Yeah. That will slot onto there, and with a bit more work it should be quite a nice flush fit, because I'm gonna glue the doors together, so you just take the whole thing off as one piece. So I want as nice a join as possible, and as you can see, without those hooks and all those lumps and bumps sticking out, it's a lot nicer. Moving along to the cockpit now. I'm going to change my plans on this. I'm not going to bother with the interior because there's not much to see. I've got no pilot figures, and it's just kind of holding me up. So what I've done is just carefully put this down. On the inside, I've put some masking tape over all the windows, so that when I primed the inside, because of these pieces up here, these holes for the RCS thrusters, I didn't obviously want to paint the insides of the windows black. So I've taped all over those, and of course I've got the masking fluid still on the front. So what my plan is to probably use some clear green and some lighter shades, and maybe finish it off with a silver colour, so that they kind of stand out, because they'll be like a green colour, but they'll have a bit of shine and reflection to them still, because obviously on this side it'll be the unpainted plastic, but on the back side will be some colour, just to make them stand out a little. That will then give me a lot more freedom to get all this sorted out. And what I've found is by sanding around the inside edge here, so that this kind of wall is a little bit thinner, it fits on a little bit better, reducing that gap. It's still there. The main consideration, what I was trying to achieve, was on this side. It really did stick out, so I'm trying to work away at that. And it's still going to need more work because there's still quite a lump of ledge there. We've also got some defects in the moulding around the nose, but I'm hoping I can sharpen all that with the painting. I didn't sand it too much. It's I've actually tried using a I can't remember what they're called, panel line scriber, just to clean them up a little bit with mixed results. So yeah, first Dragon kit, it's not terrible. Some of it fits together really well, and this whole clear parts concept, it's not what I went out looking for. I just wanted a nice model of the orbiter. So yeah, that's where I'm at with that. So the next thing to do with this is paint the inside colours on the windows. Then I can finally glue this on and start working on all these edges and gaps and try and make all that a little bit nicer. And then once that's on, I can line up these doors and then glue them together, so that if I'm doing this as a movable object, then obviously I might glue these together and realise that the angle's not right. But yeah, I think it'll look a lot better without the opening doors sort of gimmick. And yeah, all the edges and seams, I've redid all those seams. I have lost a little bit of the panel lines right on the very edge, but there's no avoiding that, so I've had to, I don't think it's make or break. And again, the painting will probably do what I need, have the effect that I need to have on those leading edges. Ooh, just knocked the landing gear out. Then I can start painting this blooming thing. So with the pieces for the cargo hold, I'm going to use the Mr. Hobby metallic colours, Mr. Metal colours they're called, which are available for me models because that's where I got mine from. Because I want a nice, really high shine on these. I don't have any of the gloss black primer yet, or that powdered stuff that Fox has been using. So I'm going to try these buffable metallics. I think they'll do a good job. I'm also going to use those on all the engine bells. And just try and do as many colours as I can. I might try and do some variants of colours on these as well. So maybe there'll be like a dark iron for most of it, but I might put some of like a bronze colour over the edge and hopefully catch some of the raised lines. So the Mr. Metal colours are lacquer paints, so you do need to be very careful with ventilation and wearing a proper mask, full face mask. But I've got quite a few of the colours, so my plan is to try and use them in various places just to make it a little bit more exciting. Reference pictures of the cargo hold, there's not a lot to them, to be honest. It's like I said before, it's very clinical, so no real scope for weathering, but I'm going to do what I can to just bring out the details and make it worth taking the cargo bay doors off to have a look and show that off. And while it's also in this state, I've got to think about how I'm going to mount this. So if my plan is to have it coming into land, I need to suspend it somehow. And my thought was, let's move all this stuff out of the way. My thought was, and it's a bit late in the day to be thinking about this, to be honest I should have thought about this earlier. I'm going to drill a hole in the rear, probably right in the middle, because there appears to be a big enough gap for a rod to go through. And I can also have a matching hole at the front to give it some stability, because there's a piece that will go in there that will cover anything on the lower half. So if that's what I aim for, then I've got a front and an end for a brass rod to go in. And then I can glue that in place, and then use a smaller brass rod to go in the bottom, and then engineer some kind of bend in it, so it'll go into a base, and then hopefully it'll support it okay from the rear. As long as it's firmly fixed, I'm pretty sure it will all hold together pretty well. So before I get too far, obviously, with finishing and being ready to start painting, I need to do all that, because I don't want to be drilling holes after I've started painting. That would be madness. But thinking about it, I'm going to treat the black as my base for all the dark areas, and then try and get it to a point where it's almost there by the weathering. Then mask those sections off and start painting the white areas. That's my plan. Right, so I've done some painting with the Mr. Metal colours, and here's one of the engine bells, and one of the big ones. So what I did with this was to first paint it with the copper colour, that one. What's important with this is the direction that you're spraying with your airbrush. So for the top part, obviously I didn't want to get the colour inside, but I did want it on the inside edge. So I'm spraying from this direction and then rotating it in my hand to get more or less an even effect all the way around, making sure I get the top edge. Then I sprayed pretty much all over with that copper colour. Copper. So I let that dry, and the next thing I did was to get some of the dark iron, that one, and then I painted from this direction. So as you can see, you can barely see the copper anymore. Just get in focus, there you go. Because I was painting only in this direction, so of course I didn't get any copper on that edge, any dark iron, sorry, on that trailing edge there. Just painting all from this direction. It's not like a completely covered, but more or less covered. The beauty of that is, so when you're looking at it from various angles, if you're looking at it from the rear, you can see more of the copper. If you're looking from the front, you can see more of the dark iron. Now remember, these are the Mr. Metal buffables. So I've let these dry, and then I had to go at buffing it up. And this is how it's come out. Now, this one looks a bit rough here and there, for a very good reason, which I'll come to later on. But the effect of the colour and those buffable paints is really amazing. I'll have to touch up some bits, or I might redo this one. But what I started off with was cotton buds, and then I moved on to a toothbrush, and it was a toothbrush that really got the excellent shine there. And the side of cotton bud as well. So using this edge here and buffing away like that. So now you've got like a nice two-tone effect kind of thing going on, which I really like. I may put some kind of wash once it's in position, darkening down this end of it slightly. And also you got to remember to buff the inside edge going around there like that. But it's come out very nice. I did the same with the smaller, so these are the next size down, there's two of these ones. So again, I started by coating it with the copper, but again, not getting it all the way inside, so the inside's still nice and dark. yet we've got this graduation going down. And then inverted it and did the dark iron in exactly the same way from this end. So after a bit of polishing, that comes out like this, and you can see just how shiny that is. Now obviously once these are in position, they're so small it's really hard to hold it and polish it at the same time. So I'll be able to do a little bit more fine tuning once it's actually glued onto something. And because we have been polishing, it's only catching the top edges. Where it's got those creases or the recessed detail, it's keeping sort of darkness in there where I haven't buffed off, because once you've painted the missile metals, when they dry, they've got quite a gritty kind of powdery look to them. If I bring in the other one again, you'll see what I mean. See how? Excuse focus. Here we go. So if you haven't tried these buffable paints, they're well worth a go. Just bear in mind they are lacquer paints, so ensure you've got the appropriate cleaner for your airbrush, and that your airbrush is solvent safe. I have hand painted these before with a brush and had really good results with that as well. So if it's a small piece, you might prefer to do it with a brush. Just make sure you give it a couple of coats, because my thing is, the more you buff it, the more there is a risk of buffing too hard and you get down to the primer or the plastic below. Again, I've painted the tiny little RCS thrusters with just the dark iron, and I'm going to probably glue those on before I try and buff them, because they're just so tiny. I try and touch that, it's just going to go flying, and then the carpet monster gets it and I get upset. So with the dark iron, what I thought I'd do was with this one is I've got a kind of a half and half. So you've got the unbuffed side there as opposed to the buff side over here. And again, because I can't get to all the nooks and crannies, or I'm not trying to, I've got a nice kind of contrast between the shadow areas and then the raised kind of really shiny bits. Now bear in mind that the only bits you're going to maybe see are the tips of these thrusters themselves on the exhausts. So having a nice shine on those is hopefully what I'm going to get, with a darker inside, so it'll give my effect of the ice. Because like I say, you're only going to see them through the holes on the cockpit. But that's just a good idea of the difference between buffed and unbuffed. I also did some parts of the cargo hold. So here's the thing that goes on top of the space lab. I think it's a door. I'm not 100% though. I'm not an expert. And this, I used the brass colour, I believe. Let's just double check. Yes, brass. There is a gold as well, but I like the look of that. It's got an orangey brass colour, whereas the gold is a lot more lighter yellow. So that's had a brief go at being buffed. It is quite tricky to hold and buff it again, like I say, so I'll probably, once that's glued into place, I'll be able to do a little bit more work on it then. And that's going to be glued onto this. So this is the lab, I think, and that brass bit will go on there, and these two, this goes into the back of the cockpit, so you've got like a tunnel going into here. So this is all currently unbuffed, and the colour I used was, I first used this one, which was the chrome silver, but I did a little bit of aluminium on top as well. So the top part, I've not buffed any of this at all, but on the bottom you can see where I've had a pretty good go at it, and I don't normally get it that shiny, and the reason is, and this will explain the thruster bell, is I suddenly remembered I had some buffing attachments for my rotary tool. So I had a go at that, and this is why I'm on the bottom, because obviously if I screw up royally, you're not going to see it because it's going to be mounted like that. But it's come out really well. Now, it is quite dangerous because if you slip, or it's almost like it grinds it. So I'm going to limit myself to nice flat areas where the risk of screwing up these edges is minimised. But even saying that, it's kind of worth it. It's a really good effect, and especially with these silver colours. I've painted whole models in these before and never had that effect. It's because I never tried buffing it with a rotary tool before. But it is fraught with danger, so bear that in mind. I'm using this one here. So I've used the biggest one I've got so that the distance between anything on the rotary tool itself and the model is the furthest I can do. But let me just quickly demonstrate what I mean. So I'm on this lowest setting, which is still pretty darn quick. And let's just do this little section here. Now, I did wear my mask when I was doing this earlier, so I'm not going to do too much of this without a mask, because you get a load of dust coming off this, and you get a lot of residue from the buffer as well. So, but just being very careful and gentle, and I'm just literally touching to it, no pressure whatsoever. But you can see straight away between that section and that section there, the difference. So yeah, I'm going to carry on. Let me turn this off. So there you go. You can see the difference straight away between this section that I've just done and spent like literally 20 seconds doing, compared to this section which I haven't touched yet. So that's really good, because it really does give a nice shiny metallic space age kind of effect to it, which is perfect, and that'll work really well within the hold, because of all the the boring whiteness otherwise. So yeah, so I'm going to carry on buffing all these up, put the mask back on and buff these up. Then I can put them together hopefully and move on to the next thing. Oh yeah, and going back to this, I thought I'd try the buffer on this to see if I can get any shinier, and yeah, that's when it went a bit pear-shaped. So this will either get touched up or redone, but a valuable lesson learned. So try to steer clear of detail pieces like this, because yeah, you could have a big problem otherwise. See where I've ground the detail there? So that explains that. I've also painted the inside of the glass with the transparent green. This is the Tamiya X25 clear green. So I took some of the mask off one of the windows just so I could see what I was doing, because of course I'm applying that effect to the whole of the windows inside. Yeah, it's not a great finish. I had a bit of a spitty airbrush because I didn't clean it out properly. So, and I'll need to because I've got green everywhere pretty much, so I'll need to obviously re-primer or darken the insides of these again, because I don't really want to be able to see green. So what I'm probably going to do next is put a coat of a silver colour in there, just to make that shine even brighter, and obviously because you can have an interior of nothing, there'll be nothing in there, it'll be quite dark in there. So yeah, just to brighten those up a little. Okay, so after a lot more polishing and buffing and wearing out many Q-tips, I've kind of finished it to the point where I'm going to leave it now and maybe do some little bit of weathering later on towards the end. I've blue tacked the engine bells into position to have a look at, see how they might look. And I'm really pleased with them. Look at them. There are a few little areas I need to touch up, but I just love that effect of the two-tone. Let's zoom in a bit more. So yeah, so you can clearly see the copper But then you look at it that way, and it's a lot more of the dark iron, which has come out as a really shiny kind of gunmetal colour. Probably needs a bit of a clean up inside, where I've been manhandling them while buffing them. And I haven't drilled my hole yet for the stand. But yeah, really chuffed with those. So you can see at the front end here, I've glued this on. I haven't done any more buffing on it yet. I'm going to wait until it's completely cured. We've got some lovely reflections from the lab. A few little scuff marks here and there, but I might add some little details, like I say, later on. We've got this whole rear section to go in, but that's going to be mainly white with a few kind of silver bits here and there. And remember, we've got the telescoping arm, which runs along here. But that's going to be mainly white as well, with silver around the pistons and the joints. So yeah, that's fully buffed as well now, buffed and in position. How much of it we're going to see? Let's have a look. Yeah, pretty much none of it. You can just about see. So I'm going to obviously do something with the ends that are on the plastic. Make them a different colour. And like I say, when the cockpit is in place, I need something to, I think, brighten up that green a little. So like I say, I'm going to put some silver behind that. But yeah, oh, that buffer, residue everywhere. So obviously it's going to need a lot of cleaning up before I go anywhere near it with anything else. It's gone pretty much everywhere. So again, wearing the mask whilst messing with these paints, even when you're not spraying, even if you're just doing the buffing, like I say, it's always wise. So this seems like a fairly good place to stop for part 2, and then hopefully we can get on to some more interesting stuff for part 3. So as always, thank you ever so much for watching, and thanks to emodels.co.uk for supplying this kit. And do make sure you go along and visit the website and Facebook page, and watch out for the live stream on a Monday at 9 o'clock British time. And yeah, all it remains for me to do is say thanks once again, and see you next time.